Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bruin Dash. My name is Sam Connon, one of your hosts, and I am joined once again by Jack Perez, helping me talk about UCLA basketball here today, every Monday. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sam. It's really warm here in LA, and that's the perfect weather for a scorching hot Bruins team right now.
I like what you did there. Nice one. But like you said, UCLA winning streak is going. They're still perfect in Pac-12 play. And today, finally, UCLA hops into the AP's top 25. They were in the coaches poll last week, but now they are finally 24th in the AP poll. It maybe had a case to be ranked the last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, whatever it was. But now here it is. They're on the national stage and they're performing. We're going to break down the past two games from this past weekend against Washington State and then Washington. And we're also going to be looking at, around the mid-season point of the year, who are this team's MVPs, who are the most important players. We're each going to pick our guys. And then a couple of weeks coming up, we got some tough matchups, a weird schedule because of delays. We're going to break down that. What are the biggest challenges? But going back to the beginning, and by the way, if you're watching live and you want to contribute any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments, whatever, just feel free to leave them down below in the replies and comments, whatever it is, and we'll get to as many as we can. But starting off the top with the Washington games, you had 61-91 win over Washington State last Thursday, a day game. And then against Washington, who is the last place team in the conference, winless in Pac-12 play, only an 81-76 win. So a little bit of backwards results there. So Jack, give me your general takeaways from this weekend slate and what you think it means for what this Bruin team is, like what its real identity is.
Yeah, well, my first takeaway is that day games during the week are awful. It's really awful for any fans, any students trying to watch out there. Getting at 2 p.m. on a Thursday is a nightmare. I think Sam and I both had class during that time, and it's really
right in the middle of my finance lecture, so not fun.
Trying to multitask that is not great. But on the Bruins, they're looking like a team that always plays down or up to their opponent's abilities, right? I mean, other than the San Diego State game really early on this year, it's always been this case where they can look really sharp for long stretches and look really bad for these extended amount of times. I mean, the first half against Washington was awful. They looked so bad. They looked disjointed. They looked like they knew this was a trap game and still fell into the trap. But against Washington State, they kind of got the swagger going. They got this vibe. It looked like Mick Cronin's team was out there having fun. And that's what they mentioned after the game. That was fun. It was a fun time, and it's really fun to win by a lot. I don't see going forward that this team will win a lot of games like that. Most of their Pac-12 games so far, barring their first game against Cal, which was in December when they were still kind of in the middle of non-conference and it was a weird time, and the Washington State game, all those games have been super close. Now, UCLA has pulled it off every single time, but you can't continue to rely on winning these close games. Close games are fluctuate a ton. When you look in the NBA or throughout the NCAA, teams don't have seasons consecutively where they win a lot of close games. There's always years where they win a lot of close games and then the next year they lose a lot of those close games because it's so random a lot of times at these close margins. So if UCLA continues to perform like this, they're going to get a couple of tough losses. If they continue to perform like they did against Washington State, though, where they're locking down the best player or even just letting the best player go off and locking down every other guy out there, this is a winning formula for Mick Cronin's team so far.
Yeah, and I just want to say before we get into the nitty-gritty of each of the games that having a bad half is not really a bad thing when it comes to your resume, when it comes to postseason. What really matters is the end result and how bad of a game did you play if you won. I mean, yeah, the first half was bad, but the second half was good. I mean, there were some lapses there for sure. They shouldn't have been trailing with 3.5 minutes to go against an inferior opponent, but still, they pulled out a win. Everyone was trashing on Washington, and I'm in that group. They're awful, horrible this season. They lost to like Montana. They've had a horrible year. That's very clear. But at the same time, I don't really think there's a such thing as a bad win. Like people are trashing on UCLA and like, oh wow, you only beat Washington by 5. I'm sorry, Oregon, who's the only. Not only, but one of the other contenders in the Pac-12 at the top with UCLA, one of the main opponents that they haven't played yet and people are kind of afraid of. They beat Washington by 3. So I don't really know if beating Washington by 5 is that different from beating Washington by 20. I mean, yeah, it's good to have a blowout like you did against Washington State, but a win's a win in my book. It shouldn't be held against them. You win close games, you win blowouts, that's fine. And who knows? The Kansas City Chiefs last year on their way to the Super Bowl just has to keep coming back, win these close games, fourth quarter comebacks, staging like double-digit comebacks. UCLA might have to do the same thing, and we've seen that against Washington. They've been playing close games against the Arizonas, Colorado, Utah. It happens, but the teams who are coached well, who are well-rounded, like UCLA is in both of those categories, they can consistently win in these close games, as they've shown over conference play. Outside of that Washington State game, basically every single game they've played in 2021 has been within single digits on either side for 99% of the game. That's just how it's been with this team, and they still win.
Yeah, and obviously the best thing about UCLA is their depth. I mean, you could have a night where Jake Kyman goes off. There's a night where Jaime Hawkins Jr. goes off. A night where Tyger Campbell goes off. I mean, his birthday night when they were playing against Arizona, one of the Arizona teams, he decided not to pass the ball that night and just score for himself. If he can do that consistently, that's amazing. But there's always a different guy that can step up and take the reins for UCLA. Washington, as talented a team as they are, you know what you're getting with them. Same with Colorado. If you can stop McKinley Wright from doing well, Colorado is basically nullified. And that's what UCLA was able to kind of do when they beat Colorado. He had a good night, but not a great night, and UCLA came out with a win. If you do this, though, the only problem with winning close every time is that your ranking won't get very high up. You know, they look good in the KenPom rankings, but as you said, they just barely now cracked the AP rankings. The eye test matters, and the eye test is really going to matter once it comes to March, where they're going to get ranked, where they're going to get seeded, who they're going to be playing against, what their road to Sweet 16 and Elite 8 would be. All of that matters. The eye test matters at that point. So yes, while these aren't losses, and a loss is much worse than a win. Even a good loss is worse than a bad win. You don't want to continue to win by 5 against Washington, win by a couple points against both the Arizonas, win by a couple points over Utah and Colorado, when you could take a game to really dominate, like that Washington State game. The best part of the Washington State game was that guys were able to rest. We saw guys like Kenny Nwuba come in and get some valuable game experience, but other guys like Tyger Campbell, Jaime Hawkins, who have been playing almost every minute, it seems like, out there, especially in these close games, got some rest. And that's going to be a huge factor going into later stages of February and then ultimately into March.
Yeah, I think just looking at that Washington State game, you had the starters, Johnny Juzang, 29 minutes, Tiger, 28, Jaime, 24, Riley, 18, Bernard, 19, Jalen Hill, 20. And then you've actually got someone like Jalen Clark get 16 minutes of playing. So like you said, it's valuable when you're trying, when your identity as a team is depth. It's important to win those games by more so you can kind of put those lower players on the totem pole into real game speed basketball without kind of risking a close loss. So I understand that. I will say, though, going to the Washington State game, I was running the numbers during the game. They were just blowing them out. They were up by 20 basically the entire second half, which hadn't happened since the San Diego game. It had been a long time since the UCLA team had ran away with the game. So that's great. It also was nice to see Johnny Juzang for the second game in a row. He played well against Arizona, and then he played well against Washington State. So in those 29 minutes, he was 7 of 14 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. So 50% shooting across the board, only 1 turnover, 2 steals, 17 points, led the team. That's what you really want to see from a guy who should be just a walking bucket, a pure just shooter. That's it. And maybe he gives you a little more, but at the very least, he gives you shooting. And the sad thing is one game later against Washington, he was kind of a dud. He really didn't do much for you at all. He had, what was it? He had, in 24 minutes, he was 1 for 5 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3, and that's it. 3 points, 3 assists. So he got a block and a steal. So I'm impressed with his defense. He's a solid defender. That's why he's in the starting lineup, I think, even when he's not playing well offensively. But you're going to need him to play well offensively, because when you don't have a go-to guy, you need multiple guys to be threats to score. And Now there's only one or two guys who can score. If Juzang gets involved, that's three. If defenses have to respect him a little more, that opens things up for a fourth guy. Whatever it is, I just think that he needs to be more consistent. He needs to play every game like he did against Washington State and Arizona the week before. And I hope we can see a little bit more of that from him moving forward.
Yeah, and it's really all these little things that UCLA has to get right. Whether it's Jake Hyman battling on the defensive end and getting some tough boards, which he's been doing, especially this past week. And he looked good out there. I mean, obviously wasn't the toughest competition, but you have to perform night in, night out. Jalen Clark hitting those clutch free throws at the end of the game. For this team to really evolve, they're going to have to get they're going to have to get contributions from every single person out there. There was a couple weeks against the Arizona teams, Jalen Hill and Cody Riley weren't looking the sharpest the entire time. So guys like Kenny Newell were able to step up. Guys like Jaime Hawkins were able to step up and really take over those games. And you're going to need that because there's going to be off nights for guys. Tiger Campbell can't save you every single time. He's not going to go out there and hit 20 and 10 every single time you're out there. Jaime Hawkins isn't going to be shooting 50% from three every single game like he has been. Chris Smith, as we talked about, is out for the season. So that's a huge part of your team just absent now. And so they have to rely on these other guys. So doing these little things like hustling for the ball, hustling for rebounds, really working on the defensive end, making the other teams tired is really beneficial for UCLA right now. And while it hasn't translated to great defense yet, and it's one of Mick Cronin's biggest probably scares right now is that his team is so good offensively and defensively, well, not terrible, definitely below what he'd want them to be, especially as a defensive-minded coach. They're going to get there. And if they just continue to do the right things over and over again, this will be a scary team by the end of February.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to overreach here because I'm not sure the exact stats, but for the entire season. But at the very least, Washington, they were plus 11 on the board. Washington State, they were plus 15. This is a team I don't think has lost a rebounding battle all year. I'll look at the stats a little more, the game logs, but I mean, they, without having a 7-footer like they did with Moses Brown or Thomas Wells or a veteran guy like that, they have just great big body hustle rebounders. So I mean, you have the last two games, they've had 4 guys with 5+ rebounds. It was Jaime, it's Johnny Juzang, it's obviously Hill and Riley, but also against Washington State, it was Jalen Clark had 5 rebounds, and Johnny Juzang is not a great rebounder, had 5. And then Jules Bernard, who is a great rebounder for his position as a shooting guard, he had 9 rebounds against Washington. So it isn't even just the big men, it's the wings. This is a really great rebounding team. So when you take the balanced scoring, offense that I think is 9th in the KenPom, 8th, one of the top offenses in the country when it comes to efficiency. So if you have a team that can score and rebound efficiently, that's awesome. Next part that's missing, like you said, is the defense. It's really not there in the KenPom. There's something in the 60s. It's not great, especially when it comes to a Mick Cronin team. When you look at the top 25 teams in the KenPom, it's really only LSU and UCLA who are up there at the top in the top 25 when it comes to the overall ratings who are that bad at defense. So that's a fix they need to make. Can't be allowing 76 points to do worst offense in the Pac-12. But still, there are worse problems to have when you know that you can defend well on certain possessions, you can defend well in clutch time, and you can score the ball and you can rebound. So there was a lot of positives to come out of this weekend, even if the defense wasn't really up to par for Cronin. I'll say that.
Yeah, and one of the big things that comes with defense is maturity. And as Mick Cronin mentions time and time again, there's no seniors on this team anymore. As soon as Chris Smith left, I mean, yeah, you got redshirt juniors like Cody Riley and Jalen Hill, but a lot of these guys are young and they're not well versed on the defensive end. Jake Hyman looked lost on defense last year, and while he's not a great defender, he's now getting up there. He's getting better, and you can tell he's maturing and getting a little bit more comfortable on that side of the court. A guy like Jalen Clark, if he continues to get more and more minutes, is very long, and Mick Cronin has been praising him time and time again for his defensive effort and his ability to swipe at the ball and get after it. You know, as you're going to move on through the season, we're going to see more and more games that are in the 60s. We're not going to see these 80s, 70s, 80-point outbursts. When you look at the USC game,
score 91 again.
Not going to score 91 again, probably. When you look at the USC game from the end of last year, where it's 54-52 at the end of the game, I mean, we're expect to see more like that. Maybe even against a Cal this weekend, who last year UCLA beat Cal 50-40 in a game. Things like that might not be that ridiculous again, but expect more of that.
I'm just saying that was an ugly game.
That was a really, really bad game, and hopefully that doesn't come to fruition for either team again. But Mick Cronin's teams will get better defensively. He just has to train them. And, with the shortened training camp, with everything that was happening over the summer, didn't really have time to drill them. As they get more experience, this defense will come along. And I think while Bruin fans should be worried right now, it's not the ultimate worry. I think the ultimate worry would be something like a lack of a consistent scorer like a Chris Smith was.
Yeah, and before we move on next topic, I just want to, I'm looking at the game log. UCLA has been the better rebounding team at 2 of its games this year. They were -4 against San Diego State in the opener, lost that obviously. And then they were -2 against Marquette, and they won that. It was a close game. Marquette was a really good opponent at the time. They had just beaten the top 10 Wisconsin team, but they somehow pulled out a win without getting the advantage on the boards. But every Pac-12 game, they have won the boards. Just wanted to point that out. Moving to the next topic, though, halfway point in the season, pretty much. And it's time to look, even though we're talking about this balanced scoring load, everyone contributes mentality that Mick Cronin has. Jack and I are going to discuss who the most valuable player is at this point in UCLA. Maybe they're not for the year just because it's a balanced team, but still, we're going to try to crown who has been you can give the most credit to for UCLA's hot start in the Pac-12 play and the season as a whole. So, Jack, I'll let you go first. Give me your case. Give me your guy.
All right. I first have to apologize, especially for last year, because I was not high on this guy. I thought he was good at times, but he seemed inconsistent. There were times, especially towards the end of the year, where he was really turning it on. He hit big shots, but it's Jaime Jaquez Jr. This guy is insane. He is the best defender on the team, in my opinion. I know Jalen Hill looks really good out there, but Jaime could really guard almost anyone out there. He's tough. He hustles after every ball. He's hitting threes like crazy now. He's got a great free throw shooting percentage, other than that one game where he had to play 55 minutes, every single minute of a triple overtime game, and his free throws were starting to look a little weak towards the end, but that's going to happen when you're tired and when you've been pushing yourself. Mick Cronin was kind of playing him as the pseudo 5 with Jalen Hill out, and I think he could do it again if Jalen Hill and Cody Riley get into foul trouble. I know they got Kenny Nwuba, they're backing them up, but I wouldn't mind seeing a 5-out formation or putting Jaime Jaquez on the biggest guy on the other team. I think he could do it. He doesn't back down from any challenge, and he's really the epitome of a Mick Cronin player, this guy that's got this tough mentality and is willing to do anything out there. Plus, he's the most consistent scorer now on the team. Even before Chris Smith was out, Jaime had the best scoring points per game for the Bruins. He's only continued to raise that, and he looks like a leader out there. He's only a sophomore, so there's going to be times where he makes mistakes, but he's the most motivated guy on this team. He's the hardest working guy on this team from what it seems. And boy, oh boy, is it fun to see him with some of his dunks. He looks crazy out there. They need a guy like that to really energize them. Jalen Hill can get some good alley-oops. Cody Riley's obviously there. Chris Smith was the guy before that who it just seemed like if something needed to turn on, he would get some crazy highlight reel dunk. Jaime Jaquez has taken over that role, and he's really propelled them. They're going to go as far as Jaime takes them this year. Sam, who is your MVP, though?
I respect the pick for Jaime. I'm glad you've come around on him because very early on last year, it was the Maui Invitational. You saw he was going to be a hardworking 4-year kind of guy for UCLA, and I think he's proven that even more this year. But I wouldn't say he's been the most valuable or most important player of this team. I think that's going to go to Campbell. Mick Cronin was saying it after the Washington game in his press conference. He said Tiger, who had a pretty bad first half, and 3 points, 1 assist, not much going on for him. Mick Cronin said Tiger Campbell sat there at halftime and realized that if he's not playing well, they're not going to win the game. Mick Cronin seconded that, said when Tiger's not playing well, we're not going to win. So I'm sticking with the coach on this, and I think he's right. Tiger Campbell is the leading assister in the Pac-12. His assisted turnover ratio, which last year was already great, especially for a first-year player, it's gotten even better this year. So last year he had 5 assists per game to 1.8 turnovers per game. And that's in 30 minutes flat per game. This year, obviously smaller sample size, 6.4 assists per game and a little bit more playing time, so you expect that to go up. The turnovers have gone down. It's gone from 1.8 turnovers to 1.7. The turnover percentage is down. Assist to turnover ratio is up. He's just getting better. Like you said, he gets the lock. Jalen Hill, they have great chemistry on those. Watching him handle the ball is great. It's not like he has Kyrie type handles when it comes to flash, but when it comes to running offense, it's great to see. He's still only the only true point guard on this team, and it's really important for him to be going at 100%. When he takes the ball and he drives into the lane, he doesn't always go, oh, I'm going to shoot or I'm going to pass. He's such a great triple threat player where he keeps all his options open. It's really fun to watch. It's kind of like watching not the old Isaiah Thomas, but the new Isaiah Thomas, who's obviously shorter guy. When he was with the Celtics, he was really the focal point of the offense. And while Tiger's not scoring like him, I love seeing Tiger kind of take a man on his hip and slow down, and it's like a start and go through the paint inside the 3-point line, the same way Isaiah Thomas did when he was an MVP contender for the Celtics. So you love to see that from your point guard. He can go out and get you 16 points or 20 points like he did this past weekend, or he can get you double-digit assists. He can play 50-plus minutes like he did in that Pepperdine game and turn over the ball, once, twice? It's crazy how much of a true point guard he is. And maybe he's not the best athlete or the best player at his position in the Pac-12. McKinley Wright, like you were talking about earlier, is really good, and he's really important for Colorado. But Tiger Campbell is a pure point guard, purest there is, and I think this team will go as far as Tiger Campbell takes them. If he's struggling, the team struggles. If he's succeeding, this team will win, and that's why the team's winning, is because he's been on top of it for the last couple of weeks, and it's been great to see.
Yeah, and when Tiger Campbell does go out, it looks like the Bruins don't have a focal point on offense. There's no guy there. I mean, there was Chris Smith. Now it's Tiger Campbell, who every single time down has the ball in his hands. But I want to shout out Jules Bernard, who's been really coming into his own. He shot hot from 3 this past weekend. He's looking better, and I think Mick Cronin is trusting him a little bit more with the ball on the offense. Even, when Tiger Campbell has to sit, there has to be someone that's running the offense. You can't just kind of play this amoeba 5-out, let's figure out where the ball is going. And it was going to be David Singleton early on. Didn't really work out. David Singleton is more of a shooting guard. He's not that great of a ball handler, passer, as we'd like him to be. But Jules Bernard has really taken that into his own and become a better player. Last year especially, it seemed like, I don't know, it was just something was missing. He didn't have the confidence. He didn't have the same level of ability that was really driving him. Now, switched his number. Maybe that did something. Johnny Juzang took the number 3, so Jules Bernard took the number 1. Maybe something has changed in his mind that has unlocked the key in him. I mean, he's only a junior, so he's still got this year and probably next year to really show out. And he's been a big improvement. I mean, you can always talk about guys like Cody Riley, Jalen Hill, all of course super important. But Jules Bernard, as that pseudo backup point guard / wing, starting wing, has really propelled the Bruins to this extra level. Now, who knows if he'll be able to keep it up for the rest of the year. We haven't seen him perform over a full season yet like this. But with Chris Smith's absence, he's going to get a lot of time to prove himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the same way that Chris Smith improved a lot last year, enough to be Pac-12 most improved player, Jules Bernard doing a similar thing this year, averaging about 11 points per game. It's really good to see because as someone who watched this team and covered this team 2 years ago, through Bernard's freshman year, it was really frustrating to watch him sometimes. He would just go into the paint with a head of steam and dribble the ball off his foot, and you're yelling at him, and everyone's upset. And now he can still be really aggressive getting the hoop, but he's a better three-point shooter. He has a lot more finesse down by the rim, whether it comes to pump fakes or spin moves or just feeling the spacing of the offense a lot better. And that's great to see. I just want to point out, though, our 2 picks for MVP so far. Just by the numbers, if you go by win shares, Tiger Campbell leading the team at 1.9, Hawkes right behind at 1.6, and then Hawkes was 1.8, and then Bernard was 1.6. So they're the top 3 players. If you go by box plus minus, not adjusting for any timing, Russell Song leading the team at 7.6. Good for him. But after that, you got Jalen Hill at 6.8, Hawkes 6.3, and Tigers around the middle of the pack at 5.1. But like we were saying, this team is very well balanced, well spaced out. You got a lot of good players at a lot of different positions. It's not a one-man team. It's just fun this exercise, and I still think that the Tiger Campbell is the guy that this team has to rely on, because Hawkins can have a bad half and someone can kind of come in and replace him or replace that production at least. No one's doing that with Tiger, and I think that's what makes him the most indispensable, valuable player. I'll take that, though, and transition into our last topic of the day. What are our biggest worries for UCLA coming up? I mean, obviously, they're not even halfway through conference play. They got a long road ahead of them, but you got a road trip at the Bay Area schools this week. Cal, they already beat Cal, so we know what they can do against them. And then Stanford on the road. Stanford's reeling a little bit, but they're still talented. And then you got Oregon twice in a span of 5 days, with Oregon State in between, and then at USC after that. So it's a busy couple of weeks here for UCLA. And I'm just going to come out and say, even with all these opponents, regardless of who they're playing, the biggest worry for me is an over-reliance on Tiger Campbell, because we saw against Washington, Tiger had a bad first half, and UCLA is down 12. So as much as I'm saying that he's the most valuable player, it's really hard to rely on someone that much and expect to win all your games. It's nice when you do end up winning them, when this guy's playing well, whether it's Tiger or whether it's Lonzo Ball a couple of years ago or whoever it is. But the over-reliance is definitely showing its colors, and I don't think it's great for UCLA, especially when they're going to be playing competition. Probably probably see or Chris Duarte at Oregon, a lot of talent both those schools. And then you got Dr. Williams and company at Stanford. They're going to need more than Tiger Campbell to distribute and take care of the ball. So I think he kind of has to share that load in terms of his production and really make sure that the whole team is able to do what Tiger can do.
Yeah, and I know you talk about over-reliance on one guy. That's kind of what UCLA seemed like at the beginning of the year. They really tried to seem like they're trying to get Chris Smith going, trying to reward him for coming back for his senior year and prove that he was an NBA talent, which they didn't need to prove that. They just needed to play their game. But there were times where it looked like they were putting Chris Smith in isolation for no reason, and he would either turn the ball over or miss a layup. And look, he's a good player, but this is a team sport and a team game, and you need the whole team to be humming. I'm going to go with fatigue, though. I mean, like I said earlier, Jaime Jaquez Jr. played 55 minutes in one game earlier this year. Yes, they got kind of a decent break over Christmas time with the Oregon game canceled originally. It was supposed to be December 23rd, then got moved. It was supposed to be this Tuesday, was supposed to be tomorrow, and then it got shifted to February 1st on a Monday. That second game against Oregon, which thankfully for UCLA is now at home, they don't have to go to Eugene, is still a tough matchup. And it's going to be coming off of a Thursday where they play Oregon. That's going to be a tough game. A Saturday where they play Oregon State at home, which shouldn't be a tough game for them, but obviously there's the makings of a trap game there. That second game against Oregon is going to really prove where UCLA is standing in terms of fatigue. If Tiger Campbell isn't 100% that game, if Jaime Jaquez isn't 100% that game, if either of Jalen Hill or Cody Riley is injured or feeling a little down, the other one's going to have to step up. That's going to show UCLA's true colors. And then that next week is the USC. And I mean, USC, while they haven't really proven it as much as UCLA this year, I want to say, I mean, both teams have looked good, but USC has lost a Pac-12 game, whereas UCLA hasn't. That might be a title decider. That and the final game of the season might be title deciders. But you want to get the momentum going. If you can beat Oregon at least once over the weekend, take that to USC and beat USC, there's a good chance that UCLA ends the season as maybe a 3-loss conference champion.
Yeah, and looking at specifically opponents like you're talking about, there's definitely some talent there. Oscar Da Silva is the Pac-12 leading scorer for Stanford. He's averaging over 19 a game on the road, along with some probably one of Stanford's best freshman classes in a long, long time. That's going to be tough. I will say, though, the team that scares me the most, and you're talking about the importance of the two games on February 6th and March 6th against USC. The Trojans scare me while coming from a UCLA perspective, because they have the Mobley brothers, Evan and Isaiah, and that's going to be really tough because USC plays them on the court together a lot. They're probably their two best players. UCLA has Cody Riley and Jalen Hill, two really good bigs. And even if Kenny Move is not great, he has shown a little bit of promise defensively when in his limited minutes the past 2 weeks. I will say, though, even though it's not necessarily the talent discrepancy that scares me, it's that UCLA Mick Cronin actually has been averse to playing two big men on the court at the same time. And maybe they can avoid doing that against Washington, even though Washington had height. They had a 7'4" guy and a 6'10" guy at the same time. They were fine running with Hill and Jaime or Jaime and Riley, whatever the combination is. That may have to change in the USC game. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Cronin makes that adjustment, if he makes that adjustment, and what the result will be for Hill and Riley and what their respective roles will be when they're playing in the same five-man unit on the court at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully Mick Cronin can figure that out. Obviously, if he wants my advice, he doesn't have to take it. Cody Riley is your 4, Jalen Hill is your 5. I mean, have Jalen Hill guard whoever you think is the better one because he's the better defender. But, work some pick and roll action. Get your wings open. Johnny Juzang, Jake Hyman, Jaime Jaquez can all shoot the 3 really well. Tiger Campbell can distribute it to them. It's not impossible for them to play with 2 bigs, but it would be a huge change. Maybe throw Jaime in there as the better defender. Maybe, I don't know, Jalen Clark, obviously he's pretty short, but put him out there so you don't have to worry about the best guards. There's solutions there for Mick Cronin's team. He just has to be willing to find them.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because Hill is the better defender, generally speaking, but he also is much better at closing out and doing switches. And it kind of, when he has to switch to a wing or a guard, I think he's better at that than Riley. So that impacts who he's guarding or where he is on the court. I think that's something to take into account. But either way, those are going to be important games coming up. The Cal game on Thursday will be important. Stanford game after that will be important. It's all important when you're undefeated. Everyone's coming for the throne. They're coming for your neck. It's an interesting time, a really fun time to be covering UCLA basketball, to be a UCLA basketball fan for anyone out there. So just make sure to come back here next Monday. We'll be talking about the results of those games. And just want to say you can follow Dash Sports on Twitter at Dash Sports TV. You can follow me at Sam Connon, and you can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. So follow us on Twitter for any UCLA news, for UCLA coverage, UCLA opinions, whatever it is, and make sure to come back next Monday at the same time, 4 p.m. Pacific, for our next episode of Bruin Dash. So, Jack, I just want to say thank you for joining me yet again today.
Thanks, Sam. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
And that is it for this week's episode of Bruin Dash. Come back next week. Tune into those games this weekend. It'll be interesting, and we'll see what happens. See you later. Bye-bye.